Okay, so today we're going to again do a one of these episodes that I've been threatening for a long time. I'm going to call it my relevance episode. And I'm going to have to tie a bunch of different stuff together, because one of the things I'm realizing is I've covered a lot of ground, and I've been doing some episodes that have to do with summations. In my head, in my world, I've been doing a lot of things in order. 3 years ago, 2 years ago, took a hiatus, did a bunch of recording again around Christmas and January of this year. Now in January, the weather was starting to flatten out. Early February, summer was coming, buds were coming, frogs. Then all of a sudden things went nasty. And here it is, middle to late May, and it hasn't stopped raining for months. We've had like 4 days in the last, 7 weeks, something like that. I pour concrete, so I live and die by the weather. And when we get nice weather, I know when we get it, because every time we do, we go do some flat work. And those days I have to work. I'm not here. Well, I might get off early. Most of my stuff here, I've said before, I use my concrete business to budget this. That's not really true. I don't use it to budget this. I'm actually a dealer and a manufacturer. I'm an '07 manufacturer, and I do this. I have something called my gun budget, which is generated by this stuff that I do. But what my business allows me to do is, number one, it allows me to have time because I'm the boss, because I'm the owner, so I can leave early and go do an episode or work on something in the evening. But where we wrapped up, to you, it just is the last few episodes. Those were done months ago. The weather was starting to come, and my next step was to go out and shoot a bunch of stuff, do a bunch of outdoor filming, do a bunch of shooting, shots up the range, and that didn't happen. Every time we had acceptable weather, I have to be at work. And even though we're pouring down rain, and I'm able to sneak in and out because I have good men, I have a good crew. I spend a few hours in the office, a few hours in the field, and I could normally break loose hours in the evenings. But what happened is, Squirrel! I went another way. I got Squirrel! Distracted because my whole thing went sideways. So, something else, because of my ability to go down, get distracted, go down rabbit trails, be distracted by bright shiny objects, squirrels, things around me, I've really gone a different way. In the background, you're going to see something you've never seen before. This I've built just now since the last episodes. Here's another one. You don't know anything about these. These are teasers. But it ties into my relevance episode. What's relevant to accuracy? That took me a long time. I started building guns. I went to school. I learned all this crap about how to do things the way everybody else does. But everybody else doesn't win. Only a few people win. So what's relevant? What does it take to achieve actual, true accuracy? And that's a weighty question. That's a great question. And I'm going to share with you the things that I have found to be relevant now that I have accuracy. I'm going to run this up a little closer so that when I show you some of these things up here in the limelight, it'll make sense. Man, I almost should turn off some of that light too. It's crazy. But forget about all that. Relevance is something that's hard to come by. You go out and you shoot, you try for accuracy, and you're getting groups that are big and they're wide and they're tall and they're skinny. You don't know how to assess them. And you're going, is that my load? Is that the wind? Is that my gun? Is that me? Is that my bag setup? And on and on and on. One of the things I learned early on when I first started having guns built for accuracy, and I first started exploring accuracy, is the concept of letting a known shooter shoot your stuff. Because here's where it all comes down to. You're going down this accuracy road and you don't know why you can't shoot. So our tendency as guys is to blame ourselves. Our tendency is to blame, well, I mean, some of us don't blame ourselves. We think we really rock the world, but most of us don't. Most of us don't know whether we can shoot or not. So then we start down this trail of relevance. We take our best gun and we start reloading. And we go through our primer pocket, uniforming, cleaning up the cases, calling bell curves, weight sorting with water sorting for volume. Going through the kit, trying to figure out, then we go through our powders. We try this powder and that powder, and we're start shooting over a chronograph. We're trying to find where does our extreme spread at, how do we, so we start trimming next for consistency, for size. I could go on and on and on about everything from weighing primers to cleaning up flash holes to trying to get your neck tensions all the same. At one point, we have to realize that all of this that we're doing with our primers and our powder and our necks and our weighing and our blah, 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 blah is to try to make our loads consistent. Now, for a while, we go through the math thing where we think about things like standard deviation and mean and measure this and measure that, and we run averages. And we fool ourselves, but in simple fact, all of this reloading crap comes down to one thing. One thing is relevant. And that thing is extreme spread. ES. All of this stuff that we do, and we do it for years of our lives, if you sit down and look at it, you realize, oh, wait a minute. This is to achieve consistency, and the ultimate expression of consistency is ES, extreme spread. If you can get your extreme spread down in the teens or lower, double digits, get your extreme spread. You get shots 3660, 3662, 3598, 36 or 3550, 3659. My math skills are bad. The point I'm making is when you get your extreme spread down to where your velocities are within 10 feet per second, you've achieved your goal. You've taken that out of the equation. Now that you can get that extreme spread, you can take that super tight load that's got 10 feet per second, and if it's, say, at 3660, but your gun's still not shooting, you go up to 3670 and 3680 and 3690, and you go down to 3500, and now you work up and down in what's called the tuning window. Once you've achieved that ES. But let me tell you something. I'm going to first of all start by saying, okay, yes, extreme spread is the holy grail. Even though your gun won't shoot with perfect extreme spread, at least you've solved that part of the paradigm. At least you now have achieved consistency. You have conceived consistency in one place. Now you play with seating depth, you play with velocities, you play with a whole bunch of stuff, but first you have to find consistency. So after years and years and years of doing this for myself, I come to a point where I'm realizing that my only goal here is extreme spread. So I shifted my whole focus on my life to finding out where the extreme spread is. And the answer to that is in a bunch of my older videos, but I don't really tell you why it's important. I don't. The relevance of it may well slip through the cracks. Extreme spread is accomplished with an expensive scale. That's one place you can't cheat. It takes some money. You've got to buy a scale that will reload down to the individual kernel of powder. Once you are loading to the individual kernel, now I have friends who have these really cool powder throwers that you buy for big money and you order from some kid in Canada who's a freaking genius, and they're awesome and they're quick. They're on their 3rd generation now, and a friend of mine that shoots up here sometimes has got this big powder thrower assembly, and basically you just throw some powder at it, hit some buttons, and it goes to the kernel in seconds. It's huge and it's tall and it's got tricklers and it's awesome. And I love every bit about it. It's hard to bring to the match, but some of my episodes about scales, it all comes down to the relevance of extreme spread. So you get yourself a good scale, you learn to load, you get your extreme spread licked. Now your gun still doesn't shoot. So you're asking yourself, why doesn't my gun shoot? And these are good questions. The relevance of each of these things. I'll say that you can do the extreme spread work in a factory gun. You can do the extreme spread work in a 30-06 from Walmart for $2.99. Learn how to get that thing to shoot extreme. Now, it's not going to shoot great groups, but it's going to get ES down in the teens. You can do that with any gun on the planet. And in the process, you learn all about tight barrels and loose barrels and chambers and blah, 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 blah. A gun is an entity unto itself, but it's not the brand of barrel, it's not the finish of the barrel, it's not the size of the barrel, it's some things that you haven't even thought about, you don't have to worry about. The fact is that your gun has got a set of parameters, and you can get the extreme spread. And getting the extreme spread down to nothing is easier with faster powders. It's easier with faster powders and light bullets, which go together. It's harder with the heaviest per caliber bullet and slow powders. So on the subject of relevance, you got to find it. But once you've found that, then you start to go after the gun. You're wondering about bedding. So you check your bedding, you do your tests with your tightening the screws, you ask people how many inch pounds, how many foot pounds, what kind of a torque wrench do I need to get? And you go through that whole learning curve. Then you learn about scopes. And you probably start by buying something like a scope checker. This is an early Hood's scope checker. I've got 5 different scope checkers. And yes, once you're dealing with supreme accuracy, scope checkers come into the picture. But trust me, we're a long ways from there yet in our builds. Even bad scopes, from a bench rest standpoint, are only flopping around 1/10 of an inch. So the scope checker thing, irrelevant. Take it out. Now, scope bases, hugely relevant. This is why, I think I've got some here. Here's one right here. I just happen to have it. This is why this particular action, this is an Atlas. I don't even know what build this is. It was just laying here. But I know that it has a pinned, see that shiny spot over here? These pins in here? There's a hole back here and there's a pin up here. That's huge. There's a huge thing there. Those pins allow you to put this base on and off and bring it back. But more than that, much more, I will say that a huge preponderance of scope issues are not the scope. They're the bases moving. These bases on a typical setup have got some pissy little tiny screw. They're normally 2 pieces. Some of them are like tallies or 2 pieces and they're 1 piece all the way up. There's a base and a ring on this end with a little 648 screw. Base and a ring on this end, a little 648 screw. And they're teetering up here like, I mean, if you go like this, they'll rip right off. But more than that, under the shock of recoil, they move, back and forth, back and forth. Harold Vaughn was one of the first people that introduced me to relevancy. Rifle Accuracy Facts talks about this exact thing. What's relevant? Let's find the problems. Let's isolate the problems. Let's go after them. So we talk about bedding. Okay, let's make one thing clear. Any given system, when you just torque it down consistently, should shoot consistently that day. You should be able to tune and do everything that you can do and not worry too much about bedding and whatever. Now, the reason for super hypercritical bedding is so that a thing will stay in place through temperature changes, velocity changes, altitude changes. You go hunting somewhere, your stock's got to stay stable. And when you work something up on a given day, you want to be able to go back another day and do the same thing. This is why wood stock's out the window. So in the subject of stocks, I think it's important that you get a good stock. But a good stock won't make your gun shoot. A good stock installed well, in the same sense that the most expensive scope in the world may or may not work, because if the bases are just slobbered on, if the rings are not aligned, I've got episodes covering all this stuff, but I realized I don't really tell about the relevance of it, the rationale for it, the reason for it. Here's how you lap scope rings, here's how you mount a scope base, this is important. Well, how important? That's what this is about. So, the bedding and the stock are important. This may well be the number one thing. I talk about my tuning fork thing in earlier videos. And in the end, when you come down to the relevance, what are we achieving? We've got our ES dialed now. We've got our loads going. The extreme spread is awesome. So the loads are consistent. And let me add here. One company makes RL17, another company makes H350. They're roughly equivalent powders on all ways. If you work up a load with RL17 and your window is 32, 35, and that's where you want to be, but you run out of powder because we voted like retards, you can't get stuff, and you have to get H4350 or whatever. Strive to hit that same velocity, and you're going to find that the windows don't change much. Tuning, if you ever get to the point of needing tuning, is velocity based. There's a little bit of barrel timing involved, but when you get two powders that are similar and you're using the same bullet, they're going to be exiting at very similar times in the cycle. So that's relevant, but the consistency, the stock and gun must flex properly together. I got a bunch of stuff here that I've been doing lately, showing different stocks, how I'm doing this, how I'm doing that. And it all comes down to, again, the first thing, the consistent loading, is about extreme spread. The gun and the stock and this tuning fork thing that I keep bringing up are about one thing: consistent flex. You got a good load, you got a gun that flexes perfectly, or seems to. The other big thing is to keep that thing together through temperature changes and whatever, and I've been talking about this. I'm crazy about this barrel joint movement thing. I've never really explained why it's important. On that, this is kind of neat. I just chopped off a 50 BMG. This is the end of a barrel. I'm always looking for inch 350 sized stainless steel stock so I can meld my barrel spacer unit, so I can build my rings for bushing up. And also, thank you Lilja, I just got in a Lilja. Speaking of Lilja, here's the Lilja that just came in. This is a beauty. See if I can get this thing in. There's, I don't know, 12, 14 pounds of barrel right there. We'll talk about that as I move forward. They also sent me this drop, undrilled, cheap, inch 5 stock, so that I can make. So barrel joint motion and movement, very relevant in my opinion. Very important in my opinion. So you got a load with good ES, gun that's harmonizing and working well. You've eliminated the barrel joint motion. Then the next thing is die fitment. Notice that we've forgotten all about all that crap that we started with dressing our cases and doing this. But die fitment, we're kind of back around to the fact that we've got this gun that vibrates consistently. We've got a load that shoots at a consistent velocity. But still we have 1/3 source of vibrations that are a problem. And that is the fitment of the cartridge in the chamber itself. And this is where custom die fit comes in. I don't care how you achieve it. If you build the gun around the die, if you build the die for the gun, if you modify factory dies in factory chambers, which can be done if you have a lathe. But somehow or another, you've got to get it to where each case goes into the gun, fits perfectly, so that it doesn't generate extraneous vibrations from hopping and popping and jumping around. That's a big thing. You need the load, you need the gun, but you need dies that will allow you to continue. Just getting the bullets to the same velocity doesn't solve the paradigm. Just having the good gun doesn't solve the paradigm. In the end, dies are a weak link. So, I'm just freebanging here. What's relevant, what works. I can tell you that this does work, and these are some of the things. And in that note, one of the squirrel reasons that I got distracted, went down this rabbit trail, is because I've decided to go extreme. I got to test a bunch of this stuff, so I'm going to test it using something that vibrates like crazy, stresses, bends, doesn't. My goals are simple. I need to make a packable 50 BMG quarter MOA accuracy that kicks less than a 0.6. And it's going to be relevant to this relevance episode. I'm using this to try test for relevancy. So it'll tie together. When we come back, we'll be talking a little more about these 50 BMG projects. And I haven't forgotten about the others. It's just been puking down rain and colder than a witch's tit out there. So we're dealing with that. One of the ways we dealt with it, I've got layers upon layers of clothes on here. I got a big old sweater under here. It's freezing out there. I'm out on the lathe trying to put this stuff. Anyway, I got to go, but we'll come back. We'll talk about the BMG projects.